So let's now discuss about using a camera. So 35 millimeter revolution steps in using a camera. So the the introduction of 35 millimeter compact camera is the one responsible for helping cameras become an exciting part of today's creative society. So modern 35 millimeter compact cameras and single lens reflex or SLR cameras are the favorites of the most amateur and professional photographers. So these cameras are versatile, durable, economical, and produce exceptional results. So the power of 35 millimeter So the power of 35 millimeter cameras, including popular single-use cameras, was challenged in the past decade by the introduction of smaller format APS or advanced photo system cameras. But the quality of APS images have never exceeded that of photographs made with 35 millimeter cameras. So the most So the most recent camera in the field of photography are digital cameras, which create images electronically on a computer chip instead of chemically on film. So this revolutionary breed of camera is a product of computer age and captures images that can be viewed on computer monitor screens, made into photo prints with a printer or sent anywhere through electronic mail. So cameras are generally categorized according to the size of film that they use and are referred to as small, medium, or large format cameras. So small format cameras include 35 millimeter cameras by the name itself. 35 millimeter camera uses a film with 35 millimeter width. So the actual size of the image recorded on the film is smaller than the film itself. So it is because there are sprocket holes running along both edges of 35 millimeter film to help guide it through the camera. So the area of the images made by 35 mm cameras or 35 millimeter cameras measures 24 millimeter width by 36 millimeter long. So much less common cameras are older 35 millimeter half frame cameras, which make smaller images. They use 35 millimeter film but only produce an image measuring 18 millimeter width by 24 long. So this is half the size of the image made by regular 35 millimeter cameras. So other small format cameras include APS cameras, which are smaller than 35 millimeter cameras and use smaller film. APS films have a width of So others other small format include APS, which are smaller than 35 millimeter cameras and use smaller film. So APS films have a width of 24 millimeter, but unlike 35 millimeter films, they are simply identified as APS films rather than by millimeter size. So as to the actual image area produced by APS cameras, it measures 16.7 by 30.2 millimeter compared to the images produced by 35 millimeter cameras. So a camera that has a format smaller than the APS is called sub-miniature camera, which was made by Minox. So this so-called spy camera uses an 8 by 11 millimeter size film supplied in tiny cartridges. So cameras that are larger than 35 millimeter and APS camera are called medium format cameras. So they are favored by advertising and fashion photographers who like to use films that are larger in size than than 35 millimeter and APS films because so they are favored by advertising and fashion photographers who like to use films that are larger in size than 35 millimeter and APS film because bigger negatives and transparencies are easier to view and handle. So the films for medium format cameras measure 6 centimeter width or wide. So the width has nothing to do with their names. So the films are identified as either size 120 or 220 roll film. So the only difference between the two is that 220 films is twice as long as 120 film, which means you can make twice as many exposures. So medium format cameras, depending on on their design, produce a square or rectangle image or both. So camera with a square format produce an image area 2 and 1/4 by 2 and 1/4 inches and were originally known as 2 and 1/4 cameras. So they are known nowadays as 6 by 6 camera because the width of the film is 6 centimeter in metric measurement. So some medium format cameras can be fitted with various interchangeable film magazines, which are sometimes called film box, to produce different rectangular formats. So these rectangle formats are 6 by 4.5, 6 by 7, and 6 by 9, as well as the 6 by 6 square formats. So there are film box that allow 35 millimeter films and Polaroid instant film to be used with medium format cameras. So the most versatile type of 35 millimeter camera today is the single lens reflex camera. So this is because the lens or the lenses on a SLR can be changed, and the photographer sees exactly what the film will record. So these factors make a big difference uh, when you are composing pictures. So computer chip, circuitry, and other technological improvements have led to the development of smaller and lightweight SLR models. So with emphasis or emphasis on electronic exposure controls. In addition to exposure, other automatic features that make SLR cameras convenient to use include auto-focus lenses or auto wind or motor drive. So to advance the film, so auto wind and dedicated flash units that automatically set the correct flash exposure. So 3 millimeter compact cameras are recommended for snap shooters and have some advantages over SLR cameras, including easier using and lighter in weight, smaller in size, quieter in operation, and less expensive. So this type of camera is popular on occasional picture taking. So this type of camera is recommended for frequent or serious photographers. So a simple rule to remember regarding the use of your camera is to hold it steady. So with a little practice, you can avoid this all too common mistake, so which is known as camera shake. So the easiest way to start is by shooting at a shutter speed of 1/125 seconds or faster. So that way your shutter helps cancel out any movement you might shake or you might make. So some photographers prefer 1/250 second for this reason. So when shooting at any shutter speed, a common mistake that results in camera movement is to jab at the shutter release. So the shutter release button should be pressed gently. So practice in front of a mirror and see if you are moving the camera when you press the shutter release. So another you can do in front of a mirror is to check the way you are holding the camera. So it should rest comfortably in your hand. You should turn the camera from horizontal to vertical easily. So, among high-tech 35mm compact cameras features electronic vibration reduction in its lens to help you avoid blurring pictures when you hand holding the camera at slow shutter speed. So, some SLR telephoto zoom lenses have the same feature, which is called image stabilization. So, which eliminates or lessens the effects of camera movement while allowing you to shoot handheld pictures at slow shutter speeds such as 1/60 and 1/30 or even 1/15 seconds or 10 seconds ha. So loading your camera, sorry. Loading your camera. So the best advice to successful loading your camera with film is to follow the instructions in your camera manual. So while the procedure is basic, different cameras have different instructions in loading film mechanism. So many 35 millimeter cameras features auto load and thread the film leader onto the film take up spool automatically. So older models require you to manually attach the leader of the film to a permanent or removable take up spool in the camera. So auto load camera are not always foolproof even though they are designed to load film easily. So the procedure to correctly load film in 35 millimeter auto load camera are: first, open the camera back and insert the light tight film cassette, or film magazine for Kodak. So into the space in the left hand side, which is film chamber. So you have to pull up the rewind crank or rewind knob to do this. Next is the cassette will only fit properly when in the film or the film's light sensitive side. So sensitive side, which is the emulsion is facing the lens. So you then draw, and then you draw the leader, the film's narrow end that sticks out from the film cassette past the shutter curtain. So do not touch it. So toward the take up spool. Then the last, stop when the tip of the leader reaches the film loading mark. And then carefully turn the cassette spool by hand if you inadvertently pull too much film from the cassette. So this will draw the film back until there is no slack. You may have to remove the cassette from the camera to do this. So for loading film manually, the basic procedure is the same as for loading film in auto load cameras. So except the film leader must be manually inserted to the take up spool before closing the camera back. So release the shutter to advance the film until the sprocket holes on both sides of the film are engaged in the sprockets of the film transport reel. So it seems that economy-minded photographers who manually load cameras always try to get an extra frame on their 36 or 24 exposure rolls by closing the camera back after engaging only the film leader's single set of sprocket holes. So you may want to change the film in your 35mm camera to another type before shooting the entire roll. So in order to do this, you must rewind the film until its leader remains outside the cassette so that you can reload the same film in your camera at a later time. So in all cases, the first thing you have to do is to note the camera's film frame, counter the number of exposure already made on the partially exposed roll you are going to remove. So if all the film was accidentally wound back inside the cassette because you manually rewound it too fast, or the auto rewind action was not stopped in time, so you have missed future use of the unexposed unexposed frames. So you can take the cassette to a shop where the film leader can be retrieved form the cassette. So you can do this by yourself by buying an expensive film leader retrievely device. So exposing the same film frame more than once may desirable to create special effects. So many modern 35mm single lens reflex camera allows you to do double or multiple exposure. So you simply activate the multiple exposure control to allow the shutter to be recooked or one or more times without advising the film or the film frame counter. So some compact cameras features a multi-exposure mode that permits two or more exposures to be made on the same film. So film frame. So other 35mm camera models are designed to prevent accidental double exposures by advancing the film every time the shutter is cooked. So they do not allow you to make multiple exposures. You can bypass the protective features of 35mm camera models and recook the shutter without advancing the film in order to make additional exposure on the same film frame. You can make multiple exposure by following the steps. So first, take up any slack in the film in the cassette by carefully turning the camera's film rewind crank or knob. Hold the crank or knob in place so the film's tension is not lost. So press the film rewind button to free the take up spool. So recook the shutter. Sometimes the film pressure plate is weak and too much film slack or tension will allow the film frame to move slightly. So the result is that the frames are not perfectly aligned and your two images will not overlap exactly as you expected. Always make some practice shots to see how your camera performs using double or multiple exposure. So the shutter speed and lens opening that the camera sets automatically or that you set manually to make an exposure largely depends on how sensitive the particular film is to light. So film is piece of acetate or polyester that is coated on one side with light sensitive chemicals, light striking that coating called emulsions make an invisible latent image that is only seen after being acted on by other chemicals during processing. So films are categorized as low speed film, medium speed film, or high speed film. High speed film, which is also fast film, requires less light to make an image than a slow speed film. So a numerical rating system gives each film a specific film speed, so which is known as ISO. So the system was established by the International Organization for Standardization, which is ISO. So, and was adopted early in 1980s by Kodak and other film manufacturers. There were two sets of numbers to indicate the film speeds prior to ISO. So one system was determined by American Standard Association, or ASA, and became the standard in the United States. Another is overseas in Europe, the German Dutch Industry Norm, or DIN, rated film speeds with a different numerical scale. You should always remember that the ISO numbers tell you exactly how sensitive a film to light in relation to all other films. So for example, a film rated ISO 64 is twice as sensitive as one rated ISO 32. So an ISO 200 speed film is twice as sensitive as an ISO 100 speed film, as is in ISO 1600 film compared to an ISO 800 film. So shutter speeds are easier to understand compared to lens opening when it comes to basic exposure setting. So shutter speeds determine how long light is allowed through the open shutter to expose the film. So these speeds are normally indicated on a shutter speed control dial or in a LCD information panel on 35mm SLR cameras. So shutter speed are also found on a control ring on the lenses of older non-SLR camera known as rangefinder cameras, which have lift type shutters. So to manually set a shutter speed, you turn the shutter control dial or lens ring to a number that represent a fraction of a second or more, and determine how long the shutter will open. So together with shutter speeds, you must also understand lens opening in order to understand exposure. So lens opening is also known as lens aperture and lens diaphragm. So the relative size of the lens opening is indicated by numbers called f-stops. So the f-stops numbers indicates the relative amount of light that is allowed to pass through the lens. So the smaller the number is the larger the lens opening. So the greater the amount of light passing through the lens. A larger number of f-stop indicates that a small amount of light is passing through the lens. So the range of f-stop depends on the particular lens design and manufacturer. So the most common f-stops are f/2, f/2.8, f/4, or 5.6, f8, f11, and f16. Some lenses may have smaller openings such as f22 and f32. So a few may have a wider opening such as f1.2 or 1.4. So as with shutter depth speeds and film speeds, you must understand in the relationship of f-stops. How much light passes through the lens is relative to the change from the f-stop to another. So moving from one f-stop number to the next closest f-stop either doubles the amount of light passing through the lens or decrease the amount of light in half. So it depends on the direction you move the f-stop. So either towards the wider lens openings, smaller f-stop number, or toward the smaller lens opening. The basic rule in taking pictures is to focus on the most important part of the picture. So for example, with portraits, you must focus on the eyes of your subject. So remember that even if your subject looks sharply focused in the viewfinder of your camera, it may not look sharp in the photograph. You must need to know the depth of field. So depth of field determines how much of the pictures from foreground to background will be in sharp focus. So for example, subjects in the viewfinder of compact cameras and SLR cameras are different. So compact cameras are always appear sharp to your eyes, while those in the viewfinder of SLR camera may not. So it is because compact cameras have two lenses. One lens of compact cameras is used for viewing, which is non-adjustable lens and shows everything in focus. So the other lens of compact camera is the one responsible for transmitting the scene to the film and is adjusted for focus. So SLR So to autofocus a SLR camera, you must aim first the camera so your subject is at least partially located within the focus detection area marked by circle or bracket in the viewfinder. So then you slightly depress the shutter release button that will activate the micromotor to automatically adjust the focus of the lens. So the focus control switch on the lens must be set to automatic or A, and the focus mode selector on the camera must be set to one of its two automatic modes, which are known as single shot or S and continuous focus or C. So the concept of depth of field aside from focusing plays a very big role in the result of your pictures. So depth of field scale is used to help you accurately determine and control how much of the picture area will be in sharp focus from foreground to background. So with small format cameras, this scale is found on manual focus lenses and on some SLR autofocus lenses. So SLR zoom and telephoto lenses often lack a depth of field scale. So the depth of field scale is most convenient because it is engraved on the lens barrel and available for quick reference. So the scale consists of matched pairs of numbers that correspond to f-stops. So they are located on either side of the point of focus indicator on the lens. So not all corresponding f-stop numbers are always included on the depth of field scale because of space limitations. Remember that the scales vary according to the lens. Some types of lenses like a wide angle lenses offer considerable depth of field and the scale is spread out. So for lenses with limited depth of field like telephoto lenses, the scale will appear jump together. So the scale will tell you how much of your photograph will be in focus. So that will be our topic for the day. So I hope that you listen, and that's all.